because as the president of the association, obviously CCM is a big part of what we do. Customer experience has been, certainly part of the CCM experience. But peeling back the onion and looking at, what came first, the chicken or the egg, it's obviously the customer experience did, because, customers' experience went back to when the first person bought a stone wheel from whoever in the cave. And every day we have customer experiences that are totally unrelated in many ways to CCM. If you go to the grocery store, that's a customer experience. You park in the parking lot, is the parking lot clean? Are there baskets? Is everybody, nice within the store? Is there a good slab? There's all kinds of things related to customer experience. So then it made me wonder what's driving customer experience as it relates to CCM, and it's plain and simple as technology and how people use technology. So as I was going through all this, you gotta love Google. There's no shortage of information on the internet in terms of Google and CCM or customer experience. And everybody's got their own thoughts and points with regards to what it is, what the trends are, and so on. And lots of people have different ideas on how they blend together. But I thought, I think we know what CCM is, although I'll cover it from my perspective and what the definition is. But what are those trends that are going on in the CCM side? What's important for the customer experience, and what are those trends? And what are some of the common failures? We talk about what this is, we talk about what that is. I'm not going to go into in detail on how to do it, because there's a lot on the internet about how to do it also. But what are some of the common failures? And what I've actually done is I've taken information that other people have posted, obviously, and their thoughts, leading analysts and people that I consider as experts in our industry, because I not only value their input, but I think based on some of the commonality of these topics that they're pretty much spot on. So, gosh, I hate getting old. This was the definition that we found: the ability to maintain relationships with customers by utilizing software, which I thought was interesting, and processes to tailor communications according to customer needs across various platforms. And CRM was the combination of data mining, CRM, and variable data. Now, when I started looking at CCM, I started thinking about early on in my career, there were customer experiences. I actually worked at a warehouse for tool and die supply, and we had our daily customer experiences, which were pretty simplistic, because I was trying to correlate this whole CCM thing, the software and everything, with what it used to be like in the good old days. Some of you will remember, others won't. This is before fax machines. But, we would have a salesman go out, he would sell, and then people would call in, place an order. I'd pick up the phone, I would write down the order information, write out the work order, send it back to shipping and receiving. But there were a couple elements that were unique at our company back then that I never thought much about. Is my boss, who was the president of the company, it was a very small company, the president of the company said, when you talk to somebody, you do two things. Number one, you're having a conversation with them, write down some of the personal things that they're talking about. My son's graduating from college this week, or high school, or whatever. I'm going on a vacation, or anything like that. So we used to write down all these little notes, and then when they would call back, we would in fact look at these little notes and, hey, how'd that vacation go? And it totally blew them away, and we had very, very loyal customers, because we communicated with them on a one-to-one basis. The other thing we had to do, the second thing was 3 or 4 days after the order was shipped, we had to call them up. And once again, this is a small company, we processed maybe 30 or 40 orders a day. We had to call them up and say, hey, did you get your order? Is everything okay? Whatever. And there were only 2 or 3 of us in the office that we did all of this. And people really appreciated it. Their retention level was outrageous. Well, when I started thinking about this whole customer experience and CCM, I'm thinking about how is that different? It's not that different other than we're doing it with technology as opposed to that human intervention, which I still claim is probably better in many, many ways. So, if I look at putting it another way, what we're trying to do is establish that personal relationship, maybe not picking up the phone and doing all that, but a two-way virtual relationship with your customer. Each being very unique, interaction of one. People talk about transactional documents and it's the document of one. Well, if you're truly doing it correctly, it's a document of one. So, some interesting statistics. Why is CCM important? They're looking at a 12.3% year-over-year increase between 2018 and 2026. The market in 2017 was $1.24 billion and expected to reach $3.47 billion by 2026. Two interesting dynamics there. One, if you sell software in this space, it's a good time for you, and it's going to be even a better time as you move forward. On the other side, if you sell software in this space, or you're an enterprise user, looking at that, you're going to have to make some investments. And let's see, we got another. There we go. You're going to be making some investments for your company to support CCM within your industry. Thank you. You get to go to the head of line for lunch. So you get to go to the head of line for lunch. So. Okay. One of the interesting statistics I saw was with regards to omni-channel. We talk about multi-channel, we talk about omni-channel, we talk about these different communications, and and beyond just email and text and that type of thing. But now we're into video. Your TV will talk to you. I'm waiting for my refrigerator to send me a personalized message. Because everything's hooked up to the internet these days. Last week, my wife and I were out of town, and my son, who's visiting from China, he was at home and he was doing a party with his buddies. So I took out my app on my cell phone and turned the air conditioning up to 91 while he was having his party. So took him a while to figure it out, but you gotta love it. So, but on average, 89% of their customers, as compared to 33% for companies with weak omni-channel strategies. So a strong engagement with your customer is imperative. Another thing, 89% of customers get frustrated because they need to repeat their issues to multiple representatives. I will tell you, and I'm part of the older crowd. Well, most of my friends would rather get on the phone and talk to customer service reps because they're old. But if I don't have to talk to a customer service rep, I'm good. If you get on that treadmill, talk to this person, they transfer you to another department because that person doesn't have the authority to resolve your problem, then you have to go back and repeat the whole story. So I'm one of those 89% of the people, and it's aggravating. 87% of customers think brands need to be put more effort into providing consistent experience. how many times have you received communications from somebody? I'll give you an example. I got, a couple of years ago, I got a piece of mail from my mortgage company kindly offering me a mortgage rate higher than what I was already paying, which I thought was pretty generous of them. And then I got an email from the same company with a different rate, but also higher, telling me that I can buy that boat that I want or whatever with, an equity line and a higher percentage rate. So a little inconsistency in terms of message. How many people have signed up for, I don't know, cable service, and then 2 weeks later you get an offer for a better deal than what you signed up for the year before or the 2 weeks before. So, that consistency of message and thought, not just message, but people, they need to start talking to each other or people are not going to be happy. So demand for an omni-channel customer experience is going to be amplified. The number of companies that invest in omni-channel has jumped from 20% to more than 80% based on information from PricewaterhouseCoopers. So, mobile. Scott's going to be talking about mobile here shortly, but how many people, I don't know about you, in fact, I believe my mobile phone is my blessing and my curse because, well, it is, you're too connected, and you got to set it down, and, it's a blessing and a curse. You can stand. I was in Huehuetenango a couple weeks ago in Guatemala, and I kept up with all my emails while I was in Guatemala. The ironic part of it is I'm an AT&T customer at my house, which is a suburb of Tampa. I get 2 bars. When I was in Huehuetenango in the mountains of Guatemala, I had 5 bars. So, I was able to be in touch, but I wasn't able to get really involved in what I was doing. I was distracted. But my experience is, if I had a bad mobile experience, you want to go online, you want to do your business, you want to get off, and that's it. If you have a bad mobile experience or any experience on a website, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And people are not that loyal. The 66%, it's really like the brand or company. I'm disappointed if the mobile site is a bad experience. Well, being disappointed and jumping ship are 2 different things. 55% a frustrating experience on a website hurts my opinion of the brand, and a bad mobile experience makes me less likely to engage with the company. That's the key statistic. If you, in fact, have a bad mobile experience, what are you going to do next time you go there? Even if they fixed it and, you don't go back. If you don't go back, you don't buy. So mobile has become more and more, everybody's got a phone. We all rely on it. There are certain things that I wish I could do on my mobile device that I can't, either maybe because I'm deficient from a technical perspective, I'm old, or I can't see the board or the screen. So, but I'd prefer to do everything or most everything on my mobile device. So, one of the people that had some interesting observations about trends was Doculabs. This is from research in early 2019. Excuse me, I apologize. Let me turn this off. And they had 5 trends that they saw, which I thought that was kind of a sparse list, considering on the complexity of CCM and some of the changing technologies and softwares. But going through them briefly, their number 1 trend was a continued migration of CCM systems into the cloud. So what they're saying is that hosted CCM services are going to become the norm. Quite honestly, I don't think that's rocket science. I think we could see, that migrating and happening already. A lot of software companies in particular are up on the cloud because it makes sense for most organizations. Some organizations are still trying to hold everything in-house, but hosted, cloud-based software just makes a lot of sense. We have CVent as an example. Everything's on the cloud. We have other software that I don't have to screw with upgrades. I don't have to screw with all of the things that are disadvantages for having things in-house. So what they're saying is, as more organizations adopt platform as a service, it's going to begin to look more like managed services in the cloud. So the second trend is tighter integration of customer behavior data and content analytics. This is really part of the whole CCM strategy in the sense that we have to find out more about our customers. We data mine, we do analytics, we do all these things because we want to target people with relevant information. And there's a whole plethora of new information that's out there. I mentioned my refrigerator. You can laugh about that, but it's a touch point. The air conditioning, I haven't heard from my air conditioning system yet. But, stuff that's embedded in your clothes and your Apple Watch, all of these other things are touch points, in addition to your normal communications and buying patterns that you deal with on the internet. So I agree with them on this, that it's going to become more and more of an integration between how customers behave and the content and what they do. So further movement towards end-to-end digital experiences. This was another one I didn't think was earth-shattering because digital transformation has been a real buzzword in the last couple of years. They are trying to drive people to paperless. My phone company, I think they stopped asking me a while back, but they were going to plant a tree, if in fact I would stop getting my paper. They haven't offered me any money yet, but if they said I'll give you $100 and click here, I'd take the $100 or even a gift card. But they're talking about people paying a premium for paper. How many people still get paper bills? Oh, good. We're in the printing industry. So. We do some amount of print, so I do it, and I have a fun time. It's not as fun as it used to be, but used to be able to tell kind of what printer the thing was printed on, but those days are far over with. But, and they continue, I think a continued reduction of high volume print. Once again, I didn't think that was so earth-shattering. The fourth trend, more customer access to their records. Once again, this was the natural, the evolution, that two-way communication. In order for us to get information, they're going to ask for information. And when we feed back to it, we got to be able to, that's got to be a cylinder or a cycle where we develop that two-way communication. So movement to better communication experience at a lower cost. CCH or CCM is not cheap. If you think about the software, if you think about all of the things involved in it, the journey mapping, the software, the whole thing, it's not cheap, and CFOs and COOs are starting to figure out that they need to better utilize. So what they're looking at is, how do I optimize it? How do I kind of bring some of these platforms together? How do I maximize the staffs that we in fact have employed? And how do I reduce costs? Now, this is CCM from a different perspective. I got this ebook, well, let me get out of the way. I got this ebook actually, interestingly enough, about a month ago from it might not even been a month. It's published by Quadient, and I'm not trying to favor, although they're a big sponsor of ours. Also, But it was put together with the input of some pretty notable people in our industry. So it lent a lot of credibility as far as I was concerned in terms of what they were talking about. And it's not the opinion of Quadient, it's not the opinion of any one person. It was made up from a lot of people. I mean, if you look at Gina Ferrara, very well-respected analyst from Madison, Casper Roos, once again, Andrew Stevens, Mike Zink, even from Canon. They even went to the competition. That's how, well, they're not competitors actually. But David Stable, people that we are familiar with that, in fact, know a lot about this industry. So I looked at this and I went through the 12 points that they brought up, and they seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And they overlapped a great deal with other research that outside of DocuLabs that I was looking at, some of the Infotrend stuff or key point intelligence stuff and that type of thing. But it was a real interesting, and they listed the top 12 customer communications trends to watch in 2019. By the way, I saw you taking a picture of this. When we are recording this session, and we'll be sending out not only the copy of all the presentations, but I'll send out a link to this ebook too, in case you're interested. So, okay. Okay. So, one of the things that they talked about, trend number one, is enterprises will continue to prioritize customer experience as one of the key objectives of their companies. And that's going to be driven by digital transformation. It's going to remain a high priority. And as I mentioned before, the digital transformation, CCM, and customer experiences blending together. Traditional customers, as they feel, will not go away, but will become part of a digital applications and part of the overall CX strategy. They're talking about more thought to consistency of communications, fit in the overall customer journey. They're going to look at how interactions are driven and how captured information can be better utilized. Once again, this whole captured information thing is we're gathering more and more and more information about individuals, and we'll get into it a little bit here, but regulated, I was talking to somebody, regulated industries, have to be careful how they use this. They have to be compliant. They have to be, within the bounds of federal and state laws. However, unregulated industries definitely have a leg up in terms of communicating with their customers. So trend two was bidirectional communications. We already talked about this. Establishing that two-way communications with customers is important. How you do that, what channels you use, what information you extrapolate, what you do with that information is all part of this bidirectional communications. And it's going to be, as they mentioned, bidirectional is going to be more important than just outbound. Most of us, if you look at our strategies today, or, well, the strategies in the past, everything's been outbound. We're not getting anything back, other than maybe an opt-out. If you send out too much outbound stuff, you don't communicate with people, people opt out, and the conversation has just ended. And this bidirectional communication, as I mentioned, reflects a growing emphasis on the customer relationship. And it only makes sense that customers that engage in effective bidirectional communications are going to benefit, because you're getting to know me, you're sending me offers that make sense to me. Some of those things I mentioned, the bank sending me an offer for more than I was paying in my mortgage rate. I mean, 6 or 7. When I turned 55, I got a letter from the U.S. Army saying, be all you can be, join the Army. Well, I think I missed the curve on it. But think about how basic that is. The cutoff for being in the military, I think, is 45. But, the government knows that. And a simple thing would be, you're too old, but, thanks for supporting us anyway. But, those type of things are important in terms of establishing that two-way communication. Of course, they heard from me on that one. I sent them a letter back. And there's going to be, as it mentions down here, financial rewards with understanding who your customer is. People have no tolerance these days for, dear friend, dear, whatever, dear resident, that type of thing. Know me and spend the time to get to know me. Artificial intelligence and data analytics are going to become more and more prevalent. Actually, we're going to have a presentation on AI this afternoon, and it is. And I mean, these things are going to become more and more prevalent, but it makes sense. In order to gather data, optimizing artificial intelligence, gathering analytic data, just makes a tremendous amount of sense. Technology partnership and APIs, that's their fourth trend. Companies today are spending more and more time working together. It's if you look back 20, 25 years ago, it wasn't the case, or I don't remember it being the case because I was a vendor back then and everybody kind of held things close to the vest. But now vendors are working together in order to come up with better solutions. And the companies that do that are the ones that are going to benefit. The enterprise companies that are, dealing with the legacy systems and all of that, they're saying here that if they're unable to optimize their CCM, it might end up in outsourcing. Now, for the service providers, that's a great thing, but it may not be such a great thing for the enterprise users themselves. Trend number 5, customer journey mapping and analytics. My first discussion on journey mapping actually was with Scott Drager of Quadient several years ago in terms of talking about that whole thing. And he felt, and I agree with him, that figuring out where your customer goes, where they could go, where they might not go, and all of that is important to your CCM strategy. When we talked about it back then, I asked him, I said, well, why do you think this is so important? He said, well, if you don't know, and I'm paraphrasing, but if you don't know where your customer is going in terms of direction or where he could be directed to, how do you know where they're going to end up? Which I thought was a pretty good analogy. If you haven't plotted out every option for your customer in terms of those touch points for customer satisfaction, then and you've prepared and adapted for those, then you're not going to know where your customer is going to end up in terms of how happy of a customer you have. Trend number 6, customer communications as a strategic priority. Once again, this wasn't rocket scientist, but it was consistent across many of the people that I looked at what their thoughts and their different trends were. So I think it is going to remain a strategic priority, and it's fundamental to the people just staying with you. Now this one I thought was an interesting one, customer communication unification. Say that 3 times real fast. So the customer communication is no longer just channel focused, but it's become channel agnostic, which I thought was a pretty interesting observation. Customer hubs you need to manage, have a focal point, a hub to manage communications across all departments. We see so often, even within marketing organizations, that this organization is in charge of email, this one's in charge of, print and mail, this one's in charge of this. That hub of not only communications, but information is key. I've seen companies years ago that, I'll tell you when I can say this now, when I was with Kodak, we had a database for the sales organization, we had one for the service organization, we had another one for the consumables people, and ironically, the information was similar but not alike. Having that hub, pulling that information together, and being able to extrapolate the proper information is important. They're talking about the connected customer. Connecting the customer, customers expect that you know them, that you anticipate their move, and especially with younger people, that they don't have a lot of patience for getting information that's not relevant to them. It doesn't bother me as much as it should probably, but if I get something irrelevant, I just either delete it, let it go in one ear, go out the other. The older I get, the more irrelevant information I seem to receive. I don't know if it's because it's irrelevant or I'm getting old or I just don't care about the information anymore. But, personalization is going to be key, and proactive communications is going to be key in 2019 according to the study. Outside in and inside out marketing. CCM's experiencing the pressure from both inside and outside of how you communicate, how the customers are seeing the communication. And if a customer is not happy with how you communicate, if you don't listen to them as to how you should be communicating with them, then they're going to, as they put it here, vote with their wallet. It doesn't take a lot for me to go to another provider if in fact I'm not getting good communications, or if somebody in fact is not taking notice of some of the issues that I'm having. I made the mistake February of last year to disconnect my landline from Frontier Communications. In the months that followed, it took me 9 months to straighten out my bill. I mean, you would have thought just take off my landline and keep billing me for the internet, keep billing me for the rest of the service. It took me 9 months to resolve that whole issue. The problem was a lot of the things that we talked about here. Communication was inconsistent. I must have talked to or spoken with, because I called them every month once I got the bill, 24 people, easy. Nobody was empowered, which I think is one of the big shortcomings of the whole customer experience. Nobody was empowered to fix my problem. Everybody said, oh, you got to talk to my supervisor. Oh, you got to talk to this supervisor. Nobody was empowered to fix the problem. And if you look at real successful CCMs, people are empowered to fix things. One of the classic examples to me are Southwest Airlines. I don't know if you've read some of the stories. They flew some woman's wedding dress to the Bahamas because it missed a flight, or they go out of the way to do things. These are local decisions. Nobody's calling president of Southwest up and saying, can I do this? They're empowered to do that. So that's kind of a side note on this whole. Regulations and security. We do a lot. In fact, at the conference in Las Vegas, we had a lot of information on accessibility, compliance, and as more and more rules come out, both in Canada and the United States, It seems every week that they convene Congress in the United States, there's more regulations for whatever, and it's kind of a moving target. But that's not going to get better, and I don't imagine that the Canadians or government are going to pull back on that either. But it's just what they do. They have to show up to make laws, I guess. But people that are in non-regulated, I mentioned this earlier, non-regulated businesses are not going to experience some of the difficulties in a business to customer dialogue. And the problem also will be that more companies are going to deal with many different devices. The Internet of Things, I mean, when did that come up? What, 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago? I keep bringing up my refrigerator because I'm hoping it'll speak to me at some point. But more and more of that's going to be happening. More of the Internet of Things is going to be part of the CCM strategy, and you got to be there for it. And there's going to be regulations, because there's hopefully things that you can't say on a refrigerator that you can say in an email. So we talked about hybrid customer experiences. They're accelerating digital transformation to better engage their customer in channels that are probably not even existent at this point in time. But servicing these customers through these digital channels does deliver a lower cost if you're gone through your transformation and you're communicating digitally. But they're also saying that it poses some risk. And they feel that the approach has the potential to lose sight of the needs of the customer and over-rotate into digital-only channels, which I thought was an interesting observation. Forrester examined the performance of digital over versus hybrid and found that customers continue to prefer hybrid experiences. Okay, getting back to personalization and customer empowerment. We've been talking about this as far as the need for personalization. What am I supposed to be at? What? I have 5 minutes? Okay. I think that we've kind of run through that need. We need to empower the customers, and there's an advantage to empower the customers. It's like the first time you order something from, how many people have ordered from Vistaprint? They have this here, right? Yeah, you order from Vistaprint. They empower you to approve the proof, because then it's not their fault. There's advantages to empowering your customer to access data. You're pushing that decision, you're pushing that liability, for lack of a better term, back to your customer. Okay, so this is just an interesting chart. Once again, I'll be posting this. Reasons why you want to improve your customer experience. This was put out by Genesis, as you can see. I'm running out of time, so I want to get through this. So why is a good customer experience important? You can see the stats. 86% of buyers are willing to pay more for a great customer experience. I don't know. I used to be in sales, and getting customers to pay more for anything was difficult. But they're saying that 86% of customers are willing. 73% of buyers point to their customer experience as an important factor. I mean, when you recommend somebody because of your experience, then that's huge. I mean, word of mouth, recommendations based on customers' experience is important. 65% of buyers find a positive experience with a brand to be more influential than great advertising. Well, digital advertising, I don't know if a positive experience is more than digital advertising, but that's what Temkin Group has come up with. Some of these other interesting, if a customer is not satisfied, 13% of them will tell that experience with 15 or even more people and share that, they are unhappy. I'm living proof of that. If somebody ticks me off, whatever conversation I'm in, depending on how bad they tick me off, I'm going to tell people. On the other hand, 72% share a positive experience with 6 or more people. Now, I tell the equal number of people if I had a positive experience because I want them to enjoy it too. 67% mentioned bad experience as a reason for churn, but what's interesting is 1 out of 26 unhappy customers complain. What's interesting to me is, and you get this when you run even a small organization, you find out people are unhappy with something, but they don't call the person that can change it. And that's true of any company. People will, hold it back, not complain, and then when you go to talk to them about something, well, 21 years ago on, December so-and-so, you didn't do this. Well, why didn't you say something? Well, I didn't think it was important at the time. So, interestingly enough, a very small percentage of people complain. This PricewaterhouseCoopers, once again, surveyed 15 and found that 1 in 3 customers will leave a brand they love after just one bad experience. Now, I don't know how everybody in here feels about that, but that's pretty frickin' finicky. I mean, 33% of the people, if you have one bad experience, you don't complain, you don't call up, you don't try to get it resolved, you leave. So most of you know Matt Swain. He used to work for Keypoint and everything else, and he did a panel at Xplor in Las Vegas. And he did his own study, and this was part of the whole panel that he had. And he boiled down a superior customer experience down to a company that communicates clearly, has exceptional customer service, has easy to navigate online experience, and provides consistent communications across panels, a platform. And I thought that was a great compilation of all of these other things that we in fact reviewed and the things that I saw on the internet. Some of I love this. In fact, I know some kids that would probably be doing that, but anyway. Huh? What?
I bought a cannon just for that.
Anyway, what can go wrong? I'm sure there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but the important thing is when you develop a CX strategy, you got to design it for change. If you look at the last 5 years, the changes that are going on in the industry, you look at the next 5, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of things. We can assume the evolution of technology, but it's going to be more complex, so you got to build a system that does that. You've got to work with your vendors to build a system that does that. You've got to work with vendors that have a vision for how to deal with this as you move forward. The second reason was they have soft metrics rather than real business goals. And I thought, you sit down and you say, how do I measure this? Well, how many people joined, how many people visited our website or whatever, but what they say is your metrics should align with the CMO and CFO. Well, that makes a lot of sense because these are the people that are approving your budgets and doing everything else. So if you're out of line with what they think, it's not going to work. The panel or the committees move slowly and without purpose. They have lack of momentum and leaderships, which spells doom. Everybody gets excited about doing some of these things. You get your committee going, you're off like a rocket, and then you start doing this. Then you have to be pushed. So that was one of the common failures. There needs to be ownership. I mean, in any program, whether it's CX or whatever, you have to take ownership of it. Expertise is important, but not absolutely necessary, although the program would be more successful if you have expertise in the area. Resources, what they're saying is, don't try to start out in a multi-million-dollar environment because getting that much money is difficult anyway. Start a little bit smaller, prove your success, demonstrate your value, and get more commitment. And once again, I think this is the most important, it's empowerment. The leader has to have the authority to be successful. So I think I just ran a minute over my time. Are there any questions?